Hello, this is saxophonist Antonio Parker, and this is a conversation in jazz, where we are promoting jazz through telling the stories. Our guest today is the wonderful jazz saxophonist, composer, educator, and band leader, Mr. Jeff Antoniuk. We ask you to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so we can let you know when we are posting another video or going live. We also ask you to donate to our Cash App in order to support the channel and help us to produce future videos. Our Cash App is $Jazzology 101. That's $Jazzology 101. Enjoy the video. Hi, I'm saxophonist Antonio Parker, and this is a conversation in jazz. Our guest today is an internationally respected saxophonist, composer, educator, and band leader. He is considered an improv coach, and through his Jazz Wire platform, he provides adult jazz students around the world a community of support, information, content, and guidance, which helps them fill in the holes of their playing and become more proficient in the art of jazz improvisation. Please welcome the wonderful saxophonist, Mr. Jeff Antoniuk.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Jeff, welcome to A Conversation in Jazz, where we learn the story behind the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I didn't want to tell you when we were talking, but I don't know where we met, but I do recall, I work in teaching DC public schools.
Yep.
And I remember I was at a school, I can't tell you which one it was, but you brought in a band and you did one of your jazz in school presentations for our school.
Right.
And I remember talking to you and the kids loved it. It was wonderful, man. So I think that might have been the first time we formally met.
That makes sense. And you know, that's an interesting earlier part of my career here in DC area is I did presentations in DC public schools. Mm-hmm. I did like 60 or 80 a year for like decades, like for 15.
60 or 80 a year.
Yeah, it was through the Washington Performing Arts Society, and they got some funding together to send a quartet. So not only was it just me, but it was some of the best musicians in town. Amy Shook, who's been on the show on bass, Tony Martucci on drums, you know. So we got to go in and work with kids. And so I got to meet a lot of great musicians who themselves are teachers like you. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, man. So, and now full circle. Now we're here.
Yep, that's great.
Before we start, I just want to ask you about the hair.
The hair. It's mine.
Yeah. Is that part of your image? I know you've it's.
I guess it's like I'm one of those guys, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep it. And so it's like every 10 or 20 years, I'm in fashion for a minute. Then I'm out of fashion for like 18 years. But then it comes around. So it's like I keep all my ties too, man. They come back around. Skinny tie, thick tie, skinny tie.
But it goes with the music. I mean, I had a professor that said people hear with their eyes.
It's true.
So
it's true.
If you're looking good, they're perceiving the music as sounding good. So, and then if you're sounding good and looking good, that's a win-win.
It's true. I mean, I love the music for the sound, but it's like we're visual creatures, right? Makes sense.
I'm sure the ladies like the hair.
Well, I'll ask my wife about
it. Anyway, my first question is, who is Jeff Antoniuk?
Wow, Jeff Antoniuk. He changes. He's changed a lot over the years, probably. But these days, I really, I guess I define myself a couple different ways. I am really excited about playing jazz. So I'm probably as excited and engaged about learning how to play this stuff as I ever have been.
Really?
So, yeah, it comes and goes. I think every serious pro you talk to will talk about the up times and the down times in their practice, or we all have life to deal with, and that takes the wind out of the sails sometimes. But I'm just really eager to keep learning how to do this stuff. So
no doubt.
Yeah. So, engaged as a player is important. And part of what feeds that is the education stuff I do. So 20 some years ago, I fell into working with adult, amateur, playing on the side kind of musicians. Some of these folks, many of these folks are really good. You and I could be on a gig with these cats and have a good time, even though they're a CEO or a mechanic or a Navy SEAL or whatever it is they are. So I fell into working with those folks and found out that I loved working with adults who really care about this music, independent of whether they can play great or maybe they're a novice. So I fell into that. I enjoyed working with them. And I really began to see that nobody sort of in the music industry was taking them seriously, sort of as a demographic. Like, little kids, they can go get lessons in school. They get that. When you're in high school, when you're in college, when you open a downbeat magazine, you don't see an older woman with gray hair playing the saxophone.
Yes.
Right? So, but who are buying all the expensive tickets to the clubs? Who's buying 8 different mouthpieces a year that cost $800 each?
No doubt about
right? It's not the high school kids. It's not the college kids who are broke. And, it's all these folks who love the music and they're playing on the side. And so I realized nobody's talking to them seriously. Nobody has an education program set up for them. So when I say nobody, a bit of hyperbole, but 20 years ago, not so much. So it all kind of came together where I thought, let me start, addressing these folks that I enjoy working with. And over the years, it kind of turned into a business. So that's a big part of who I am now, is somebody that wants to be helpful to people that love this music, let them know it's doable. Because jazz is... Man, it's so many things. It's emotional. It's borderline religious for people. It's crazy making. It's frustrating. It's all the gray area, right? It's not black and white and all those things. And so I love trying to break it down in a way that makes it inviting and accessible to anybody.
And you found a nice, wonderful niche.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And that's a lot of, when I go to colleges and talk to students, one of the big things I'm talking about now is entrepreneurship and that idea of how do we make a living, doing music or jazz, and that idea about sort of finding a niche or what do you stand for? I love your first question. Who's Jeff Antoniuk? That's the question that all of us need to ask. Who, what are we going to provide to the world out there? What do we do that only we can do in our special way?
Wow. Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
I was listening to your, some of your recordings.
Oh, cool.
And it occurred to me that you really get, a better grasp of the musician when you hear their recordings. I mean, because you can listen to a cat play, because we're in the age where people put out singles, or, you might hear them put out a video playing on a certain song. But listening to your recordings and you learn just so much, your song selection, your compositions, how the ebb and flow, the arrangements, the consistency. And so I said, oh, this cat is the real deal.
Oh, nice.
And the variety, and so the conceptual framework. So when I was listening to your CDs, I said, okay, this cat, he's the real deal. Because I've heard you play, and I've always enjoyed your playing. But I really got to say, well, okay, wow, this cat is really, he's the real deal. So whoever your students, they got the real deal.
Oh, I appreciate that. And when I was talking about being excited about playing and practicing, I feel like I'd be doing a disservice, to be there are great educators that maybe are not great players. So I don't mean to talk down about those people. They're all, most football coaches can't get out on the field and throw the ball away, right? So it's a different thing. But for me, I want to be able to do it, and I want to be able to offer these people like a real pro talking to them. So that's just how I feel about it. That's how I want to deliver.
Yep. All right. So where are you originally from?
I'm originally from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So if you go to Montana, turn right, can't miss it.
Really?
That's it.
What was it like growing up in Alberta, Canada?
Yeah, well, it's, like for all of us, home is home and you don't know any different, so.
Is it different than the States?
It is and it isn't, and especially over, more recent decades where the internet and cable TV, kind of homogenizes things a little bit. But it's different. Edmonton, most of the big Canadian cities are right up against the border. Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal. So Edmonton is actually the furthest north one. So from the Canadian border, Canadian-U.S. border, you drive maybe 8 hours north. Not that makes a big difference, but Edmonton's a city of about 1 million people, so it's bigger than Baltimore. It's a good sized city. It was smaller when I grew up. It's cold half of the year, 3/4 of the year, but it's like that's what
you enjoy coming up in Canada.
Yeah, it was great. I grew up skiing in the mountains and doing all that. There was a lot of kind of sports stuff around me, but I wasn't really a sports guy. That was my dad and my brother, so I found an aptitude for music. Yeah. And at that time in the 70s and 80s, like probably most cities in the States, there was all kinds of live stuff going on. Yeah. Some really great, like world-class players lived in town, so I got to hear this music, go out to clubs or wherever I could hear it and hear the live music, get excited about it, and then over time, work my way, go sit in, get into one of those bands and start playing with some of the local heroes. So, so it was, it was definitely a good, great upbringing that helped set me up for where I am now, for sure.
I read that you also lived in Nigeria.
I did. Yeah.
Was that as a kid?
Yeah, it would have been 3rd and 4th grade. Yeah, 3rd and 4th grade for me.
How long did you live in Nigeria?
2 years. Yeah,
really?
2 years.
What part?
In Benin City. So Lagos is the big city that everybody knows about, and Benin City is kind of a smaller, it was where the king, the Oba, lives. And all that. My dad was a chemistry teacher, so it was a Canadian government exchange.
Oh, wow.
So they were setting up a technical college there. So my dad was like the petroleum chemistry guy.
Was that a cultural shock for you?
Oh, man, absolutely. You get dropped now. You're in the rainforest. Yeah. There's like snakes that want to kill you, and and I mean Canada at that time, pretty white place. Yeah, it's settled by all Eastern European people. I'm 100% Ukrainian. So everybody in Edmonton is Hungarian, Ukrainian, German, those are the immigrants that settled Western Canada. So it's like, it's not like seeing a black person was like unheard of or anything, but it's like, it's not like walking around DC, right? Yeah. So now, I'm a minority. I'm like in somebody else's country, and it looks different. It smells different. It tastes different. So, when I look back at that, it was the most amazing experience just to travel and to be taken out of what you think you know and to be put in somebody else's reality. Like, I think everybody on earth, it would be a better world if we all got dropped in somebody else's situation for a couple of years,
I was in Nigeria in 96.
Oh, wow.
I was in Lagos and Abuja, capital.
Mm-hmm.
And did you ever get to play with Fela? I got to sit in with Fela Kuti.
Oh my God,
at the shrine in Lagos, man. So that was absolute, just life-changing experience. Me and pianist Vince Evans.
Yep.
Yeah. So I kind of can relate a little. What tripped me out was seeing these Africans flying planes. So you. I ain't never seen nothing like that, to them. But man, it was definitely experiences that people should get.
Yep.
Just get out your comfort zone.
Yep, totally agree.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Now, do you come from a musical family?
My first, no, in sort of a traditional sense. Like, my mom and dad didn't play, and I had an aunt who sort of taught some music, piano and organ and stuff like that. So, it wasn't that there was a lot of people playing instruments around me, but my dad was a teacher, and, they both grew up on the farm, poor, kind of post-depression. My folks are still alive, 89 and 90.
Okay.
So they were born in 33 and 34.
Wow.
So, they're on a like farm in the middle of nowhere right after the Depression. So there was like, no kind of money,
Yeah.
all of that. So they both moved to the city. My dad became a teacher. And so they really valued education like that generation, traditionally does. And music lessons were just assumed, with me and all of my cousins and everybody, that you would just do music lessons. And maybe you kept on or not, but everybody does music lessons because that's that idea of, sort of taking charge, and it's education. So I don't know that there was any big, art thinking. It's just that's part of education. So when I think back, like that was fantastic. So I started on classical piano, which, I didn't.
So piano was your first instrument?
First instrument. So, I didn't love, I had no connection to the music, and I didn't practice like every other little kid, but I guess I had enough aptitude to kind of keep me going through it. So, so I kind of stepped through and did that, I don't know, 8 or 10 years.
Do you still play piano?
No, unfortunately, like sort of composer's piano, and I love that I can sit down and figure things out. Gotcha. So it's a tool for me, not an instrument.
Now, you said you had a brother.
Yeah.
Did he play?
He was 2 years younger than me, and so he was great at sports. I was not. I was good at music, him not so much. So it's kind of cool that as he came up, he's now a professor of industrial design. So like he designs, furniture and spaces is kind of his thing.
Yeah.
So it's cool that we have a blast these days because he's so smart about art. He's basically a professor of fine art. So it's kind of fun that we, cool. get to connect on that.
Yeah, man, it's cool. How'd you pick up the saxophone?
Yeah, so it in Canada in 7th grade is when we start junior high, and so that's when you pick a band instrument. So since I kind of like music, it was presumed I'd pick a band instrument. So I go into 7th grade, and there's this cool young teacher, and he's like super cool. He's a drummer. So I come home and I announce to my parents, I'm going to play drums. And they're like, hell no. They're like, no, you're not going to play drums. I was like, okay. So I was some good parental manipulation is what they did. Is I had an older cousin who went to the high school I would eventually get to. At the time, that high school was the best jazz high school in Canada. They were winning the national competitions. My cousin was a clarinet player. She was dating the tenor player in like the big band. And so I was going to her concerts.
Wow.
And I'm seeing, and so this is 1977 or something. They're playing like Maynard Ferguson charts.
Yeah.
And they've got the lights on and like a little smoke machine. My little mind is blown. And dude stands up and taking a solo. So they're like, oh, well, maybe not drums, but maybe you want to play saxophone like Ray does.
Yeah, wow.
And I'm like, yeah, I'll play saxophone like Ray. Like, I don't know anything, right? So I picked saxophone.
Was it tenor or alto?
He was playing tenor.
Okay.
I ended up with alto. So this guy that I'm talking about, Ray, is now one of my best friends. He was my first saxophone teacher, and we've known each other for decades. So
he still plays?
Yep. He's actually dean of fine arts of the college I went to in Canada.
Oh, wow.
So he's, one of the big deal guys in Edmonton now. So it was like sort of just time for a band instrument, and I kind of fell into, saxophone because of that person.
So when did you make that switch? I tried to make the switch from alto to tenor. I'm still working on it. When did you make that switch?
Yeah, so for me, I did, so I played saxophone in junior high and high school, and just kind of, got more, found I had an aptitude for it more than other stuff, I suppose. And so I kind of kept going with it. And, the funny thing is when I graduated, well, let me ask you, when you graduated, did you know you were going to be a professional musician, or did you have other things you thought you might do?
I knew since I was 10. I didn't know the concept of professional musician.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to play music. I didn't think about money.
Yep.
I just knew felt good.
That's beautiful.
And that's what I wanted to do.
I love it because for me, it didn't occur to me I could do music. Like there was like self-worth stuff. Like, and it's, I don't remember like I was super down on myself, but it was like, well, that's not me. I mean, I'm not good enough. I'm not like him or like her. So I can't do that. But I like science and stuff. So I was going to be like a physicist.
Wow.
So like when I graduated high school, I was absolutely going to go to university and study that.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, well, maybe I'll just go to like the community college and just get this music thing out of my system. It doesn't work like that. So after 1 year, it's not out of my system, it's further into my system. So after 1 year, I'm like, well, let me just do a second year and get out of my system. So it's done. No physics.
Got you.
Yeah. So it was when I was going into college after high school. And it was, it's interesting to think back on the scene in Edmonton relative to the scene, where we are here, Baltimore, DC, big East Coast market. In Edmonton, the best players in town would be doing, like they'd play the rodeo when it came to town. They'd be playing at the jazz club that night. They'd record a jingle. If there was something at the hockey game, they'd play. So essentially jack of all trades. It wasn't really fragmented because it wasn't big enough. So if you were like one of the top 5 sax players, you're working your ass off.
Yeah, you're getting all the gigs.
Yeah. And so because of that, and it's big bands and shows and all this, so everybody's doubling like crazy. They got their flute and clarinet and bass clarinet. So they're playing alto and tenor, to make yourself marketable. This is before computers, so people are doing copy work and like all those things that the industry would support. So when I began to think like, maybe I want to try to make some money at this, I began to see like, oh, maybe I need to buy a tenor and maybe I can do some other gigs.
That's the money horn.
Yeah, well, apparently. So that's what it was. So I got like a Yamaha tenor, from the music store that my parents helped me out with. And quickly I became gravitating towards the tenor. And and so I've just played tenor for so long. Yeah. And when I pick up an alto, it's hard for me, right? Because the voice, right? And the intonation and just making the sound just right. Like there are guys that do a great job of both. Yeah. But historically, Cannonball didn't play tenor. Train played alto like a little bit in the Navy or something. Yeah. So, back in the day, you just find your voice and that was that. But there were plenty of people who do a great job of both. But for me, that's not me. I play tenor and soprano and that's it. That's what I do.
That's all good, man.
And it's funny you talk about tenor being like the money horn. When I was at North Texas as a student, it was really competitive on tenor. There were just so many good tenor players. And there were a lot of good alto players too, but it seemed like, tenor's the hard way to go, man, because everyone's playing tenor.
Charlie Young, I think, went to North Texas.
He did. We were at different times.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my son is 20 years old, and he was going to be my retirement plan. Guess what he does?
What?
Jazz tenor saxophone.
Really?
So much for retirement plan.
Wow.
Yeah, so he's at North Texas, and so he's saying that the altos, there's a ton of great alto players there. So, man, the alto
making a comeback.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Now, what kind of music were you listening to coming up, like in Canada?
Yeah, so the first music that got me excited, like the drummer, that teacher in the junior high, and it turns out he was best friends with Ray, the guy that was in the high school. So it's like some of the really good players in town were teaching junior high and, that kind of stuff. And they were listening to Tower of Power, Earth, Wind and Fire, Brothers Johnson, like all the great, black music for sure, coming from that tradition. And generally kind of like, West Coast LA stuff, El Giro with all those great studio musicians. And so that just, that got me going, like funk and the rhythmic side of thing, all that stuff was horn.
Gyra.
Yep. All that stuff was horn based or at least in there. So that got me kind of hearing, and I wasn't really into acoustic jazz yet. Because it just sounded kind of like old and lame to me, But right, Spyro Gyra, the Maynard Ferguson Big Band, or Earth, Wind and Fire, like, man, that sounds like someone could dance to it, and I hear a saxophone.
Yeah, and I remember, you're a few years older than I am, but I remember the sound at that time.
Yep.
Yeah, so I remember coming up, Birdland.
Yeah,
we were doing,
Oh yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that was
It
a
was a good time.
soundtrack for years
Yeah.
of, every school concert or
Yeah.
whatever. Yep.
Now, did music come easy for you?
Good question. So, I think there was sort of an aptitude, or just relative to, compared to some of the other stuff that kids get into, like that flowed a little easier. So I don't love talking about talent. I mean, I think it exists, but I like talking about hard work.
Hard work. Yeah.
That I understand.
But do you believe, though, there is people with just like a natural, for example, do you have perfect pitch?
I don't.
Okay.
No.
Your son might have it.
Closer than me. He's got a good sense of pitch.
What I've noticed, all the guys that, I mentioned that I went to school with Christian McBride and Joey DeFrancesco, and Warren Wolf and all these cats. All of their parents played. Their parents were like professional musicians.
Yep.
And it seemed like they were able to hear and pick things up.
Yep.
Quicker. I don't know if that's genetic kind of stuff, but hard work certainly pays off.
Yeah. Well, I see that with my son too,
Yeah.
is he's got all sorts of aptitudes that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So I think, I had some kind of wiring or whatever that helped me do music better than some. But for me, it was really a pretty intellectual hard work thing. I had to understand it, and now I had to get the reps in.
Yeah.
And so, so I really appreciate seeing and hearing that. And I've read a lot of books, lots of times about sports that are, talking about talent and aptitude, or how does a crazy, how do you explain, huge achievement? And, sort of the trend these days is to not talk about talent or skill so much. Think about Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Think about Wayne Gretzky. Think about some of the greatest athletes on earth.
Yeah.
They had something handed to them.
Yeah.
But Michael Jordan didn't make the team as a freshman in college.
That's true.
What he did is worked his ass off.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
So whatever aptitude you have or don't have, fine. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
Let's get to work.
Yeah.
Right? And efficient work. So that's what sort of gets me excited. So, and not that I was, some great hardworking student, but sort of over time I began to see this is the formula, and it's pretty easy.
That's good teaching.
Yeah. And that's it. And to me, I don't care, the least talented person, we can get you sounding good on Blue Bossa and Oleo and whatever. I guarantee we can do it, right?
No doubt
and some people will go faster and get further, but everybody can do this.
Yeah. And also I think it's how bad do you want it?
Yeah.
As a kid, I wanted to get it. As a kid, I heard acoustic jazz. I heard Charlie Parker at the age of 12 and was blown away. I didn't need nobody. I was he blew me away.
That's great.
And it's I heard jazz the first time I remember hearing acoustic jazz played live, I used to go to Sullivan Music School in Philadelphia. And I was taking my saxophone and piano lessons, and I would hear this sound coming from the basement. And so I would go down, man. It was a little Joey DeFrancesco. He had to be about 10 or 12, maybe 10, playing with these other cats, Robert Landon, Lewis Taylor, and it blew me away.
Yep.
So now everyone doesn't have that experience when they first are introduced to acoustic jazz.
Right.
What was your perception of acoustic jazz?
Yeah, so I remember it had to have been, so I remember getting, being excited to get to high school, which is 10th grade in Canada. And there was a cool teacher there who's now still a good friend of mine. And it's we get to play some good big band stuff, sort of excited about the program. The program was not as good as it was, 6-7 years earlier. So now it wasn't, the best school in town or in the country or anything. But still, there's some good musicians there. And so I remember being real excited. And I remember it was a North Texas chart. It was written by Lyle Mays, the keyboard player from Pat Metheny's band back when he was a student. So I remember hearing a big band chart and this incredible solo that probably my friend Ray Barree had played. And so I remember in 10th grade going to the music library and taking out the lead alto chart and I want to see what that solo looks like written out. And I take it out, and it's a bunch of slashes with like letters and symbols above it.
Wow.
And so I'm very confused.
Yeah.
So I take it to the band director, and I'm like, Mr. Zimmerman, I want to see the solo, but I think this is the guitar part because there's a bunch of chords here. And he puts his arm around me. It's like, you little idiot. So that's called improvisation.
Yeah.
That solo you like so much, that was made up.
Yeah.
I had no clue what the hell he was talking about.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a rude awakening. And so it was right around then. He was a trumpet player, my band director, Doug Zimmerman. I think he was playing, it was Miles Davis, If I Were a Bell, Harmon Mute. And I remember hearing that. It's like, man, that is some squeaky lame stuff. That doesn't sound anything like Earth, Wind, and Fire. It wasn't produced, and it didn't have the thing. Yeah. So I kind of remember it's like, And so over time, I sort of grew into it through the electric stuff, the funky stuff, things with the beat, fusion, and that was sort of the gateway drug.
Yeah.
And now, I'll listen to Earth, Wind, and Fire all day long for sure. But now, I'm just listening to Joe Henderson and Cannonball.
It's wild because I couldn't hear Train when I first heard him.
Yeah.
It's like I had a friend of mine, drummer Eddie Holman. He brought my favorite things out. He said, "Man, check this out." I was into Bird and Grover Washington Jr. And I took it home, man, and I'm like, I couldn't hear it, man. It was just too. First of all, it was too clean for me. I was used to jazz was supposed to sound like them. Because I was hearing Bird at St. Nick's when somebody recorded at the club and had all that low fidelity and all that. That's
interesting.
Yeah, so that's how I thought jazz was supposed to sound.
Right.
And then it wasn't until I got in college that I started I went to Blue Train and I was able to hear, and then I heard the progression and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so.
Well, that's so interesting because I wanted to hear that produced LA sound, and you wanted to hear the room. You wanted to hear, that's so cool.
So, and that's just how I heard it.
Yep.
So, but was there a particular teacher that really impacted you in terms of you going into music and saying, I want to do this?
Yeah, probably, those teachers I'm talking about, Murray Smith, who was my junior high teacher. And the funny thing is he's had all kinds of incredible things in his life. He's now principal at that school after running the entire school system. And he just loves being a principal.
Yeah.
So I, go back and visit him and go into the school again. So seeing a young, cool guy, he just looked hip and he played the crap out of the drums. And, it's like, oh man, I think I could do that.
Yeah.
So I didn't imagine I could be somebody on stage. Like still, again, that whether it's smaller goals or a self-worth thing or whatever, but, I couldn't imagine myself being, the big soloist, but it's like, I could probably get good enough to teach some guys and maybe be in a college and probably play in a wedding band or something. So it was funny that I had these sort of, funny now that my goals are sort of small and what that was all about, because I've certainly surpassed, whatever I imagined I could do as a player, surpassed that, which is cool. But, that's still part of my wiring of, if I would have imagined like, man, I'm going to be at the Village Vanguard when I'm 23. How much closer just having those larger goals. You get closer when you shoot higher.
Do you remember, or around what age or what period of your life did you know, okay, I want to pursue this music thing?
Yeah, so it was probably, when I got into college out of high school, and at that time the place I went to was a community college, but it was like one of the really good music programs in Western Canada. Okay. Even though it wasn't a 4-year school, it was just a 2-year thing, but they had lots of the good players in town.
What's the name of the school?
It's called Grant McEwen. At that time, Grant McEwen Community College.
Okay.
So now it's become a 4-year university. Gotcha. They're starting to offer a master's. So now it's like one of the real good music schools.
So when Canada. You went back and told Mom and Dad, I'm going to be a jazz musician.
Yeah. So that was tricky because my dad's a teacher and again coming from Depression era, like so the main thing they said is not sure about it, but I can tell you're serious. Like I was being serious about this. And they said, well, you have to get a degree because that's just what you do. And certainly in that era. So this was a 2-year college. So I got my little 2-year diploma. The university in town, good big university, but they didn't have a jazz program. So I start, kind of asking around. Nobody, like this is now the early mid 80s. And in Canada at that time, like, I don't know how many universities, 10, 20, 30, 40 universities, no jazz program. There was one place that offered a jazz degree. And that wasn't even in Toronto or Montreal or anything. It was in Nova Scotia. Wow. St. Francis Xavier University, still a real famous program. So, it was clear to me I have to go get a degree in this. And so I was going to have to, travel a couple thousand miles to a little island in the east to get a diploma. So I thought, well, why don't I go to this, famous school I've heard about, North Texas? Okay. Again, it's pre-internet, like it's a pamphlet. Someone gave me a pamphlet, or I had to go to the library and find the, whatever. And so somehow I, kind of applied to North Texas. And so that was the process of like, yeah, I guess I'm going to do this. And it was really education kind of based, I guess. Yeah.
So what made you choose like North Texas as opposed to Juilliard or,
Ignorance. Happenstance. I mean, honestly, like, I can think of two things. Like, when I was sitting in the high school or sort of the all city big band or whatever, they'd be handing out big band charts, like done in ink with a rubber stamp that said NTSU, North Texas State University. And people in Edmonton would sort of talk about that program. One or two people had gone away and gone there and come back. So again, it was like really word of mouth and just sort of in the air. I didn't hear people talk about Berkeley or Indiana or USC or Miami or, some of the other schools that existed. So it was frankly that. And then I remember in high school, I, went to one of these stage band competitions and whoever the adjudicator was, some old dude came up and said some stuff to us and he pulled me aside and he was like, hey kid, you sound pretty good. That C-star mouthpiece isn't working. You need to get a Meyer. Get a Meyer 5. And I'm like, thank you, sir. And it turns out that was Neil Slater. They had a North Texas program. So in the middle of nowhere, and then the name of the town was Red Deer. This is in Red Deer, Alberta. Here's Neil Slater. And, he just took an adjudicating gig. And so like just these couple little things had North Texas in the back of my head. So when it came time to do something, again, there's no internet. You can't call up jazz programs. It's like, I've heard of North Texas. Everyone says North Texas. I'll go to North Texas. So I don't remember investigating anywhere else.
Wow.
Yep.
So you sign up to go to North Texas. Is this your first visit to the States?
I think I had been like on a family vacation. Okay. Maybe we'd gone to Hawaii one time or to Disneyland or something. Okay. But that's it. So I got on a plane with my trunk full of stuff and, landed at DFW Airport.
Were you nervous?
Hell yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because, yeah, absolutely. Like this was pretty big. Yeah. I told my son this story and I think he's having this experience being a freshman there. I remember getting to my dorm and just, again, there's no Yelp and Uber and all this. So I was like, now I've got all my bags and I'm in Dallas Fort Worth Airport. Wow. And I sort of somehow have a sense Denton's like 30 miles away. And it's like, so I've got like American cash in my pocket and somehow I get a cab and it drops me off in front of a dorm. And now I'm get into this dorm. So I finally find out where the practice rooms are. And so I take my alto. I think it was alto. Was it alto? No, it was tenor probably. And go to the practice room. Somehow I get let in and whatever. I'm sitting in the practice room, get my horn out. And right next door, somebody starts playing. And they're playing things I have never heard. It's like they're tearing.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, damn. So I'm like, what am I doing here? And then so I start putting my horn together. And then in the room beside me over here, someone starts playing like, I don't know what, right?
Wow.
And so now on both sides. And I'm not feeling good. Like, I want to go home. Except for home is like 3,000. And so then someone across the hall starts practicing. So essentially, I started to cry. I packed my shit up and I went back to the dorm. I didn't play a note.
Wow.
Because I was just so scared, outclassed. Like, I don't even want to play a note.
Yeah.
I don't belong here. And so that was the first night. And man, if I could have gotten in the car, driven home, taken a bus, I'd have been home.
Wow.
But I couldn't because I was, there I am. So I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a very supportive experience. You know, these guys had nothing against me. They didn't know I was sitting there. They knew nothing about me. That was all me in my head, right? But, you know, and I think most of us have had those sort of experiences. You get your horn out and someone's warming up like, oh, damn, I think, right? And you know, and when you push through that, you've just grown as a human being, right? Doubt. And so that's important stuff, you know?
And sometimes students need to know that that's how you grow. You gotta grow through this stuff. You know? So
and you know, and Bird had that same story with Papa Joe Jones throwing a cymbal at him. And Melissa Aldana has that story about doing jam sessions as a 90-pound woman from Chile. Everybody has those stories if they're honest enough, right? So I think it's important to share them.
No doubt.
Because all these adult students or, you know, all the young students coming up, it's a real human thing. So I think we should, you know, share that.
No doubt.
Yeah.
What was your major at North Texas?
Yeah. So I ended up getting jazz degree, you know, jazz performance kind of stuff. So I became an arranging major for a while, and that helped me get a scholarship, which helped me get, you know, better tuition rates and stuff like that. And I did some, you know, big band writing, but ended up doing a performance degree. And I wanted to go to a different school for my master's just to get a different, you know, some different input. And just the finances weren't working out. And by that point, I'd been at North Texas. I'd done 2 years of college in Canada, and then I did 4 years to do my undergrad. I didn't need to take that long, but I had so much to learn. So I started playing flute in the flute choir. Wow. I started playing bass clarinet in the wind ensemble. Like, I just started soaking.
So that was a great experience for you.
It was really good. Yeah. And I'm kind of wired for school, and you know, I do okay in that environment. So it wasn't a hardship to be in school. I loved it.
Any professors that really?
Yeah, they're definitely, you know, the saxophone professor's name's Jim Riggs. So he retired a while ago. One of my good friends who was like the lead alto in the 1 O'Clock band, his name's Brad Leely. Okay. And so Brad is now the saxophone professor.
Wow. Okay.
And so Brad, you know, Brad's done all kinds of great lead alto gigs, the Basie band, the Ellington band, Harry Connick's band for the longest time. So, you know, Brad's had a real great career and still does.
Yeah.
So, you know, wonderful professors like that, but especially the peers. Like, that was kind of the biggest thing is like the hang or the people I looked up to that were ahead of me in the program. Like, that was the deal.
Now, jazz was during that time, you know, mid 80s, maybe jazz, it was an uptick in the interest in jazz from young people. Because I remember, and I was in Philly, and I remember Wynton Marsalis. When he came out, and the impact, you know, because he was playing classical and he was playing the jazz thing. And then I heard Roy Hargrove, and it was like
Roy's from Dallas. Like, he was in high school when I was at North Texas. So we were hearing about like this kid at the Arts Magnet High School.
I met him when he was in high school. Because in 87, we did they had the downbeat competition in Chicago. So I'm coming from Philly. I was in the All City Jazz Band, and Roy was coming from Dallas with, you know, and a lot of, and that's where we all met, you know, and I call it the Young Lions generation.
Right.
You know, and it was, and then I remember being on campus, the More Better Blues came out, you know, so it was like this, and then Joshua Redman came on the scene.
Yeah, it was all kinds of stuff. And Terrence Blanchard. And there was a Blue Note band called Out of the Blue with Kenny Garrett and Ralph Bowen on tenor and those guys, Ralph Peterson. So, so there was a lot going on.
So that was a great time. That was a great period, especially for those of us coming up and trying to learn how to play this music.
Yeah.
It was just good. I got to see Hank Mobley.
Ooh, I never got to see him live.
In Philly. Yeah, I got to see him, and I heard him play at a club on 40th and Market, and he was playing on one lung.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't know who he was at the time.
Yep.
Somebody said, "You know who that is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's Hank Mobley." I said, "Okay," because I was in the Bird.
Yep.
And he came over and talked. He said, "Man," Hank came over and said, "Man," he saw me with my case. I was in high school. He said, "Can you play that thing?" I said, "Yeah."
That's great.
Yeah, man. So,
Well, hey, let me ask you a question. So you were asking me about, professors that were important to me. And I was saying kind of like the environment, the larger environment, nothing against the professors. Yeah. When I put together Jazzwire, this online platform I have, and I put it together before COVID. So it wasn't like some knee-jerk reaction like, oh man, we needed everybody on earth needed to take their thing online. So before that, I was kind of hypothesizing like, what would meaningful jazz education look like, online? And so I was, and a lot of my adult students, say things like, oh, I wish I got to go to North Texas. I wish I got to go to Howard and, study all that great stuff. And when I thought about it, like, yes, I learned great stuff, great professors, but I started thinking about the experience. And so when you think about your experience in those settings, whether it was in high school or Howard, and when you visualize, some of those meaningful moments, was it sitting in a classroom with a textbook and somebody lecturing,
No, I was one of those kids. We were, believe it or not, I don't know, we were more self-directed. I was around a lot of wonderful musicians, first of all, like young cats that like Joey DeFrancisco, Christian McBride,
who's going to teach?
Right. Joey was just, at 10 playing the way he, and so my thing was more intrinsic.
Yeah.
I just was knocked out by the music. Charlie Parker, then these cats, young cats. The school, it was fun because we got to do like I went to a performing arts school, so we got to do productions and all that kind of stuff. But that didn't drive us like. And then I was a stubborn cat, so I didn't listen anyway. I kind of just, So most of the stuff that I learned, I kind of reflect. Oh, this is what this teacher was talking about.
Yeah.
But one teacher that really helped me was Charlie Young. Because, for example, he taught me about evenness of finger, just saxophone.
Right.
And so, and really understanding how to hear one note going to the next and making it even and that sort of thing.
That's great.
Yeah. So that certainly helped. But
what I was going to say is, sorry to interrupt. I've heard. So you and I are wired kind of different. You're wired to, kind of do it from the sound up. If I, correct me if I'm saying it wrong, but kind of more intuitive and coming from the air. And I'm maybe coming at it more intellectual. I connect to the school environment. But both of our experience was cool. The classes were great. We had professors, but sitting and having Joey kick your butt. That's how you learn. Getting feedback, going and having pizza. And, I remember going out with one of my drummer friends and him talking to me about how Papa Joe and Philly Joe and Elvin, how do you tell them apart? Why are they different? Why are they important? Maybe I learned that in a class from a professor. I learned that hanging with a drummer. So, when I started putting together these educational things, I realized it wasn't about more textbooks, more PDFs to hand out, more great lectures. All that's important. The important thing is putting together a community, like
no doubt,
where we can hang and learn from each other, be inspired by each other, get our butt kicked, lick our wounds, come back the next day.
No doubt.
So so when I started doing Jazzwire and stuff like that, I wanted it to be community based because the more I talked to people like you and thought about my own experience, the community.
But I believe you as the facilitator is important as well, because a coach has to if you being the coach, and knowing the big picture, you're able to present a process that they can develop that.
Yeah.
For example, like I do an adjunct thing at Bowie, and with the young cats of today, the first question I ask them, do y'all listen to jazz?
Right.
You know, and I said, and they said, and so how you going to play it if you don't listen to it? So they don't. So they're playing it from read notes and all that, but you have to listen to it. And I remember when I was studying with Charlie, classical saxophone, I was playing the classical stuff like a jazz cat.
Yeah.
Because I didn't listen
to it. Right.
I didn't listen to Marcel Mule and all that. And it wasn't until I realized, and I went to UDC to get my second bachelor, and I was getting ready for my recital, and I started, but I was stubborn. So I was just tunnel vision jazz. So once as I got older, I opened my mind up, and I said, well, let me listen to Marcel Mule, and then I understood what that was about.
Yep.
So I do think a coach is good. Even when I interviewed Christian McBride, because I used to sit back and wonder, like, how these cats just were so advanced. Their parents, their dad, and he would tell me his uncles would give him. He had one uncle that was a James Brown, had all the James Brown records, and then the other uncle had all the jazz. So he can, and they would check that out and check,
Yep.
And so I do think a coach is very important.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is you have to want it.
Yep.
You gotta, because you're not going to be willing to put forth that hard work if you don't want it.
Yep.
Because then, I don't recall like when I was doing it for money, and I don't know. Some people make money in jazz. Some people make more money than others. Some people make a little bit of money. So, I do think that desire and motivation is very important. So I do think a coach a teacher, I would say, is a coach.
Yep.
But the school setting, the school setting may be different because you're dealing with, they have a curriculum that has to justify the program. Sure. And so, that might, but it helps. If you want it, you can benefit from all of it.
Yep.
Yep. Great question. Let me, now did you get a master's in ethnomusicology?
I did, yeah. So finished the undergrad, and like I said, I sort of took a luxurious amount of time at North Texas, thinking like, man, I need to soak this up. Then I realized, well, let me get a master's. Like if I want to be teaching, at a college, I need. So I wanted to go away for the master's. That wasn't going to work out. So I loved being at North Texas, but I felt like I'd kind of gotten the juice out of it. Yeah. Now I'm going to stay another 2 years. So I wasn't like super excited about that, but they gave me a teaching fellowship, which meant I would direct one of the big bands and teach saxophone lessons. So It's like, okay, that's exciting. Yeah. And then they had just hired their first ethnomusicology professor, Stephen Friedson. And his thing was East Africa, faith healers in Malawi.
Wow.
And so it's like, well, wait a minute. Because I lived in Nigeria, and I know the West Africa is where all this stuff, whether it's jazz or Brazilian music or Afro-Cuban or Earth, Wind, and Fire, that comes from West Africa, give or take, right? So it's like, oh, man. So I started like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do ethno. So I took all the ethno classes. So the master's, it was like a related field because they weren't even offering a master's at that time. So I did, more or less a master's with ethno. Yeah. And that was cool because it helped me connect sort of my childhood to the history of jazz. Wow. And I'm playing in African drum ensembles and everything. So it was great. So I really liked that a lot.
Yeah, I remember I was going for a year. I was called myself working on my doctorate, taking ethnomusicology at College Maryland, University of Maryland, College Park. I just wasn't ready, at the time. So I did 1 year and realized, oh, you're not ready.
Well, those programs can be intense, right? Because that stuff is as much sociology and history as it is music, and it always most ethnomusicology involves religious studies because music is religion in most traditional world cultures. And so man, there's, it's a bit of a climb to get started.
No doubt. Let's talk about your musicianship.
Sure.
First of all, do you have a musical philosophy?
Musical philosophy. That's a great question. I guess, as far as jazz and improvisation, I think I've sort of, after, doing lots of teaching and, working with, at this point, thousands of students, where that rings most true, like I'm very, very clear. I'll have this discussion / argument with anybody, anytime, that, the analogy of jazz and improvisation being a language. And so it's so clear to me now how being a great improviser is all about having vocabulary.
No doubt.
Right? You and I are talking here. We've agreed on the language of English. So, if you want to do this interview in French, I'm going to have some problems. Right? I'm still the same smart guy I am, but I don't speak French. We're talking about music. If you want to talk about automotives, I don't know as much about that, right? But we have all this shared vocabulary, right? The more words and phrases I have, the more successful I am. So in the teaching that I do with jazz and improvisation, I base it all on vocabulary. Anybody, again, doesn't matter how old or young you are, aptitude or not, you can learn a Charlie Parker lick.
No doubt.
And now that kind of gets you going. And to me, that leads to creativity. There used to be this old BS thing of, man, I'm not going to learn licks. I don't want to be influenced. I want to have my own voice. It's like, well... So, you're going to invent your own language and try to talk to people that in this language you've invented, they don't know what you're saying, right? So to me, that's a big one. And I guess another sort of philosophy is I'm huge on limitations.
What do you mean by that?
In our practice, having limitations. So I think about like graphic art or poetry. Who would write a haiku? Why would you want to write a haiku? It only has so many syllables and has to refer to this. Or a sonnet. This needs to rhyme with that. That needs to rhyme with that. Who's got time for all that? Well, the limitations of that structure makes you get more creative. Why would you play over the blues? Why not just play free? Well, because you got to go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. That limitation, you have to deal with that. And so I love practicing and teaching by giving people limitations, because to me that breeds creativity. When Picasso had his blue period, he literally was painting everything with different shades of blue. It's a huge limitation, but that opened up his creativity. So that's one of the big things I think about.
Wow. Let me ask you this question. And I'm struggling with this. So let's say, okay, you know stablemates, right? You know the chord changes. So you know how to get through that, navigate those chord changes. What happens when you walk in and you don't know the changes? Because I find that these two hemispheres of the brain. Now, if I know the changes, we good to go.
Yep.
I want to get, this is a level that I would like to get to. I don't know how I'm gonna get there, but it's actually what you said about limitations, taking away the changes, and just relying on and playing off of sound. Meaning I'm gonna play less notes. Because I'm going to be doing more listening, and I'm a sound. Initially, I'm not going to sound like Antonio. So you ever grapple with that concept?
I try not to. Because the way I'm wired.
Gotcha.
I feel like we're all, our wiring gives us aptitude or gives us emotionally, we lean this way or that way. So I'm wired to be more intellectual. And I don't mean that as a compliment to me. This is music. Music is visceral and, but I approach music intellectually.
Gotcha.
I might, if I could rewire myself, I'd actually prefer to approach music more intuitively. But I look at it like a spectrum. And so there's the intellectual, like, I need to know the changes. I need to know the fingerings. I need to know where the 2/5 is leading. I want to know the resolutions. I want to know the voice leading. And I want to have 10 licks on this to get me. So that's kind of me. And then there's other people I know who are play the chord and I'll like, let me hear what it sounds like. And then they'll play. And I've talked to, hundreds and hundreds of great musicians like yourself. And most of us kind of agree that we want to meet in the middle. Like whoever the most intuitive musician was, maybe that was Bird. He invented this style of music and is still the greatest at it. That's insane, 80 years later, right? But he studied. He didn't just let his intuition
no doubt.
do it. He studied,
no
right? And so for me, I just look like I'm coming from the other side. I've got this intellectual, I can read the dots real well. So now my job has always been to become more intuitive and to study that. So my ears are not one of the aptitudes I have. So I had to sort of build that. So that's scary to me when you say, I'm just going to start playing, play along. So that's a scary scenario for me. But that's traditionally how it was done. Just yesterday I was talking to some musicians like, we've got the iReal Pro Drum Genius, generation now. There was the Abersold albums that I grew up with. But before 1978 or whenever the first Abersold came out, there was nothing. You went on, and there was a point where 10, 15 years before that, there were no fake book. There was no real book. How did you learn There'll Never Be Another You? You listened to it on an album, figured it out as best you could, and hacked through it at a jam session or something. So traditionally, people would learn this stuff by ear. So it would be interesting, how I would fare in 1950, where without sort of all the intellectual constructs in the fake book, it's like I'd have to develop my ears quicker. So I kind of came up in an era where I could sort of fake it, front load the intellectual approach, and my ears would come running behind later. For me especially, that kind of scenario would be the most growthful thing I could probably do today. Is put on some recording or track and make myself hear it. And
now, do you use
way.
that same process, or do you have a process for how you listen to music? Like, how do you listen to jazz? Are you listening to it? You synthesize everything together, or you saying, okay, let me just focus on the bass. Let me focus on So how do you approach that?
That's cool. Every Friday I do a YouTube video. For the last, I think it's 420 Fridays in a row.
Wow.
Like I put out a video. So on YouTube, every Friday for like 430 weeks in a row.
You don't run out of stuff to talk about?
I got a big mouth, man. And so this was one of those limitations. Like, when I did my first video like 8 years ago, it's like somebody talked me into it. I thought it was stupid. Like, who would go on YouTube and give away all the stuff they know? I did not understand. But somebody kind of made me do it. I found, it wasn't that hard. I kind of liked it. I liked spending the week thinking ahead about what I wanted to do. Like you, who am I going to talk to? Do a little research. It's like you get something from that, right? So I started doing this. And, my videos are all 15 minutes or less. So, I did a series of 200 weeks in a row. I did Digging Deeper Jazz, the series was called. And it would just be, it wasn't in a particular order or it wasn't a curriculum. It was whatever I was thinking about. Oh, I've been thinking about the Partido Alto Brazilian rhythm. Great. Let me talk to all the adult students. What's Partido Alto? How do you use it?
Wow.
How might you practice it? 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Next day it would be, minor pentatonics and how you can use that on an altered chord. Great. So, I just, kind of went through and did a bunch of those. So for the last year or two, I've fallen into doing guided listening. So I put on an album and I just talk as it's going by.
Wow.
So the one I did that came out yesterday, 2 days ago, Friday, recording is called, I had to research it. It's a Weird Miles album that wasn't really an album. It's called 58 Miles. And so it's with Cannonball Coltrane, first recording with Bill Evans in Miles' group, Jimmy Cobb, Paul Chambers. And and it was weird. It's like half of it was like live at the Plaza in New York, and the other half were like studio sessions that weren't on some other album. I'm sure you've heard it.
Yeah.
And so there's this version on there of Stella by Starlight. And I remember falling across it, or somebody made me listen to it at North Texas. And it's interesting because it's a ballad, little intro with Bill Evans. Miles plays the melody. And now it starts swinging, second chorus, and Coltrane comes in, and Coltrane's going to go to town, right? He's going to be Coltrane. Except for he plays the melody a second time. And he's barely paraphrasing it. I mean, he's literally playing the melody with some little things in there. Bill Evans plays half a chorus and then the melody out. So Coltrane's solo is him playing the melody a second time. We heard Miles do. And so that was such a big deal to me when I first heard it, because like as a tone exercise, like it's hard to play along with Coltrane, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
He's going nuts at all times. And so it's like, man, it's like if I want to play along with Coltrane, I have to like spend a month and a half learning this solo, and then I'm still haggling with the notes. I'm not really getting my tone. So this was such a great thing where he's playing so slow and so predictably he's playing the melody, where I could play with him and hear my sound. It's like, oh man, his sound's so much bigger. It's like, oh, it's brighter than I expected. Oh, you know, those sort of things. So, so these guided listening videos are fun because they're making me listen deeper maybe than I usually listen. It's like, I'm listening to like, man, like, why is that swinging so damn hard? Like, how can I talk about that? Oh, well, Jimmy Cobb's doing the rim shot on 4. So, oh, okay. So I'm, you know, as I'm listening through it, I'm just kind of pointing out things. And lots of times it's rhythm section things. I'm fascinated by the rhythm section.
Wow.
And how, you know, when does Paul Chambers play in 2? When does he play in 4?
Wow.
He's playing a simple 2 here, but he's sort of, he's embellishing more. Why did he choose to embellish more that time? But so I talk about that stuff, and it's cool that that I get a lot of comments back from people that it's helping them hear recordings that they've been listening to for 40 years.
That's nice.
In a deeper way. So again, like that's sort of a challenge that next week I haven't picked what I'm going to listen to next week, but I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You know, and now I challenge myself to listen deeper into it, and you know.
Do you do a lot of transcribing?
I haven't. The transcribing I do now is 1 measure or less. Like that's the time I have.
You said 1 measure.
1 measure or less. Yeah, pretty much. Like I did lots of transcribing to get into people's feel, to get their sound, to get Cannonball especially to get that articulation and all that. Yeah. And I'm just, frankly, too busy. I don't have the time, right? So, but I'm, every week at least 3 or 4, I'll hear something like, whoa is that? Figure out that 1 measure.
Do you write it out?
I write it down just so I have it. I don't forget it, or, a month later, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to practice that thing. Yeah. And new little bits of vocabulary. So it's like, it's like I'm hearing, an interview with Maya Angelou or Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's like, oh, what did they say? Oh, that book. Let me write that down. Oh, that word. That's a cool way to put that. Write that down. Like kind of learning vocabulary and ideas. And so a lot of my practice these days, trying to get my sound the way I want it to sound. As you know, you're talking about Charlie, just connecting notes is the most important thing. And then after that, it's tunes and vocabulary.
What's your process for learning tunes?
Ideally, it's, if it's a song I've heard a lot, that's good because it's in my head. Mm-hmm. So just the other day, I rediscovered the Wayne Shorter tune, Lester Left Town. Okay. It's this cool tune that he recorded with the Blakey Band, and it's Wayne, so it's freaking weird, and the changes don't hardly make sense half the time.
And you play along with the records?
I don't. But see, that's one of those things I should. Given my intellectual thing, I like playing saxophone, so I just play a lot, sort of by myself, trying to. And then I'm trying to come up with some explanation in my head that makes sense, like, why do those chords fit together? So I'm trying to come up with a framework. Yeah. So for me, listening and playing along a lot isn't my first instinct. My first instinct is to analyze.
Wow. Okay.
So that's where I wish my first instinct, dude, why not play along with Blakey a bunch? Like, how is that not a good thing to do? But for me, again, my wiring tells me in a weird way, like, not that that's a waste of time, but no, let's analyze it first. So again, just who I am, down to, the neurons in my brain tell me, let's understand this first. Yeah. So I do a lot of sort of looking at it, playing, trying to find out, like, man, how does F minor to E7 altered go to B flat major? And those are three of the chords in that tune. Like, Wayne, dude, what were you thinking about? So now I'm like trying to sort that out.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'll be like, okay, my brain hurts. Yeah. What did Freddie play in that spot? Yeah. What did Wayne play in that spot? Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's important, man, because in education we learn that there are different types of learners. Mm-hmm. And a lot of time so you have to, when you, as an educator, a lot of times you have to see how someone is wired.
Yep.
So, and that'll inform you on how to approach getting concepts across. So.
Yep. Well, and that's what I love working with the adults in the in-person master classes I do here in DC, Maryland, and then on Jazzwire is like I'm really aware of like people learn in different ways. Now, a lot of my students, probably the average age is 60, 65, some are 70, some are 80. So our brains are not as plastic, as pliable as they were as a young person. So we need to hear things. I know for me, it's helpful to hear something explained maybe 4 different ways. Wow. I remember when I was learning modes, what's, D Dorian. Yeah. You can explain that a lot of different ways. And it was helpful to me over the course of months and years to hear it explained 4 or 5 ways. No doubt. And then my brain would go like, okay, that one makes sense, but I get how that works,
Okay.
all that. So yeah, I try to be really open to not everybody approaches things in this analytical way I do. So I offer that, but then I'm always trying to, come at it from other directions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, do you have you're a prolific composer. Do you have a process for composition or composing?
Fear.
Fear?
Fear. So I haven't composed anything in like a year or more, so I'm not that prolific. So if I want to compose, I'll say, all right, I guess I'm going to do a recording. Okay, I'll book a recording date, and then it'll be like, oh crap, I got to write something.
Wow.
Right. So it's like a deadline, or it's that like, oh man, and it better be good, and so now I'm starting to get a little anxious, a little fearful, like in a good way. Like, oh, I got to deliver. Yeah. And so now, so the thing is,
that's your motivation.
Yeah,
fear.
It is. And honestly, like people talk to me about like the business stuff I do, or or planning a workshop, or doing this, or and I joke, but I'm not so much joking that it's fear based. Wow. Like, that I set a goal, or it's like I say I'm going to do something like, yes, I'm going to do a presentation at the Saxophone Symposium, or I'm going to play a piece. And now it's on the program. I've said I'm going to do it. I can't get out of it.
Wow.
Oh, crap. I got to get to work. I'm scared about looking like an idiot. So that's honestly how I do things a lot, is I set things in the future that I can't get out of.
Wow.
And it's like,
that's a good motivator.
Uh-oh.
Because I go through these brick walls where I can't, just nothing is.
Oh, I don't know who doesn't. I think it's human nature. So for me, I've found setting those things. And of course, it can be something positive, like I want to go to Europe. So in 2 years, I'm going to buy a ticket. And in 2 years, I'm going to go. And now I've got 2 years to figure out the money or to make the plan. Or, so like those things we look forward to. But lots of times when it's a big thing, whatever that is, it's easy to get scared and procrastinate. And again, I don't know anybody who doesn't have some or a lot of that, and I can procrastinate plenty. So, whether it's a playing thing, a business thing, a life thing, find a way to, plant a flag that you can't unplant. And it's like, uh-oh, time to get to work.
All right, let's talk about you as a performer. Mm-hmm. You touched on some things. So I read that you began touring internationally while a student at North Texas.
Yeah, I suppose so. So, the international part is easier for me because I'm from Canada.
Yeah, I got you.
I've got connections in Canada,
got you. Okay,
that sort of thing. But yeah, so at North Texas, there were some great experiences like you probably had at Howard, getting to go to Japan, getting to go to Mexico, getting to go to Canada, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that the Unified Jazz Ensemble? Was that?
Right. So those were friends of mine at North Texas. A lot of us doing our master's degree together. And, for somebody who talks about entrepreneurship a lot and really values it, I was a knucklehead in school. Man, I was just into learning how to play, right? And just playing. And I was supporting myself as a musician and teacher. But, I was going to graduate with my master's in like 4 or 5 months. And I had no plan other than, I guess I'm going to move back to Canada. I was kind of half thinking, instead of Edmonton, maybe I'll move to Vancouver, which is a bigger scene. Maybe I'll move to Vancouver and try to play some gigs. That's not much of a plan, but that's what I had.
What made you come to the DMV?
Well, so it was the Unified Jazz Ensemble. So what happened is, there's me with no kind of plan. I'm just finishing out my master's, and I'm playing in the 1 O'Clock Lab Band, which is the premier group, and that was great. And the jazz office got a phone call we have a National Endowment for the Arts grant, and we need a jazz group to fulfill this grant. Do you have a jazz group that wants to do this? And so I was just doing my master's recital with a bunch of the best players in school. And, the lady that ran the office, we're friends, right?
Gotcha.
So Darla, gives me a call hey, Jeff, do you guys want to look at this? And so the idea, it was to move to a small town in Iowa and be artists in residence for 10 months. So move your quintet to live here.
Wow.
And so we flew out, we sort of auditioned, did the interview for this, and got hired. So the town got this grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and we were the group that would do that. So we were working at a college there called Luther College. We were working in the public schools, and then working just sort of for the town on its own. So they gave us a place to live.
Wow.
A stipend, and we're like a
life was good
quintet. Right? So we're just rehearsing every day, and so 1 year became 2 years. And after that ended, there was another opening in Arkansas, Blauville, Arkansas. Really? So northeast Arkansas, just north of Memphis. So now we moved there for 2 years. So essentially 4 years of being artists in residence in these little towns. And the band sounded really good. We'd written all kinds of original stuff and made 4 or 5 CDs. So that was the Unified Jazz Ensemble. So when that ended, the question again was what are we going to do? And so we literally bought a case of beer, maybe 2, and sat around well, let's figure out our lives. The gig ends in 4 months. And it's I was well, how about we all move to Tokyo? They love jazz in Tokyo. I like Japan. Yeah. And they're no, that's stupid. And someone's well, let's move to New York or Boston. And one of the guys had done that and didn't want to, they knew how hard it was to live there. And somebody mentioned Seattle. And so one of the guys is from Silver Spring, Maryland, 1 mile from where we sit. And he knew DC, Baltimore as just a lot of good musicians, lots of work. And a place to get going. So we all, ended up let's move to Silver, let's move to Maryland. The piano player decided he wanted to move to New York. So Tim Harrison has been in New York ever since. But so 4 of us moved. I couldn't have found Maryland on a map.
Wow.
I knew it was one of the little states up by Vermont. That's what I knew. I wasn't quite right. But, so yeah.
So what was your impression of the DMV when you got here?
Well, it was, so again, it was scary. It was when I got to North Texas, man, I don't know anybody. I don't know how I fit in. So I just started going out to all the sessions and HR 57 and Twins and just, I'm just trying to meet people and get a gig. Can I join a wedding band?
Yeah.
Like, just trying to,
Now, are y'all guys still playing together?
Yeah, and so we're still playing together, and so we're trying to hustle some gigs together, but I'm also trying to reach out and meet other people.
Gotcha.
So, it's what every musician goes to when you move to a new city is like.
It's funny, man, because
sorting it out.
I came here in '87 in DC to go to Howard, but you just see the changes over time. It's like every, I don't know, 5-10 years, man. It's a new vibe, a new group of cats that come.
Oh,
yeah,
sure, yep,
yeah, and they come in this town, man, and many of them stay here. I've stayed,
yeah.
I kind of dig it.
Yep. Well, and I've always lived in Annapolis. Like when I moved here in '96, not knowing anyone, we lived in Annapolis just because it was it seemed like equidistant between, Baltimore, whatever. The rent was cheaper, this and that. So Annapolis. So I've always lived there. So it's a great place to live. I love it. But all my work has always been in Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of tricky that, it was far enough away that coming into DC 7 nights a week and doing all the sessions or staying up with people, or, you and I, I've met a handful of times ever.
Yeah.
How we haven't played together 100 times is ridiculous. But part of it is because, I live, kind of down the road a little bit.
Yeah.
And, so that's been one of the sort of the downsides for me. And as you say, as the scene keeps changing, I'm more sort of outside the scene. Gotcha. So it's interesting that my career now is more sort of
you saw the big picture.
I appreciate you giving me credit for it. I found myself in it, right? So because of the internet, so it's like, so I don't, I play in Annapolis a bit, but I don't really do that. I play in DC and Baltimore some, but not even so much. So it's actually more, this is where I live, but my career is, kind of other places in an interesting way.
You've traveled and performed internationally and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So.
And, I'm not on the road a ton. I never made it my goal to be, banging it out 200 or 300 nights a year.
Yeah.
Although, had Joey, given me a call, I'd say, hell yeah, I'd have gone. But I wasn't, kind of seeking that. But I really get a lot out of it. We were talking like the last couple months for me have been pretty busy. I was up in Canada doing some big band guest artist stuff and teaching at a couple universities. Then I went down to North Texas and did a lecture on entrepreneurship and a couple gigs. And I was in Cleveland. And so, I kind of felt like a real touring musician because I was gone a bunch. But, but it's disruptive. And, I miss my wife and all that kind of stuff. But it was so fun being, getting that energy from other musicians, which is what you and I are doing right here.
No doubt about it.
Which is what we're trying to share with other people, right?
Yes,
so
no doubt.
it's all about that community and the conversation, whether it's in words or notes, and sharing it with other people. So, it's cool to find all the different ways we can do it now.
No
right?
doubt about it.
Yeah.
What is the Jazz Update Quartet?
Jazz Updates. So when I left the Unified Jazz Ensemble, so this would have been maybe, it's probably 20 years ago. I wanted to start doing something on my own. So I started thinking about the players around town that I really dug and wanted to play with. So Tony Martucci was always, whenever there'd be something good going on, especially when we think back to that era, like Tony was and is the man. So I would just kind of follow him around. And I thought, well, I want Tony on the gig. And Tony can be a little crazy, right? Tony can be a little unglued. So it's like, okay, I need somebody sensible here on bass. So Tom Baldwin, one of the great players in town, right? Yeah. So it's like Tom and Tony, cool. And I just learned about Wade Beach, great piano. He teaches piano at Mason. So those, I thought like that would be a really cool group. And I had lots of other people I was thinking about. And so called those guys and they're thrilled to play. So that was an era of maybe 10 years when I was trying to book a lot of gigs and, get on some festivals and do a little bit of touring and record some albums and all that.
Yeah, I did Here and Now.
There's one, Here Today was the first album we did, and then we did one called Brotherhood.
Brotherhood. Here Today.
Yeah.
And Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to both of those today.
Cool.
Nice, man.
Yeah. And that's, and it's funny, for all of us, I'm sure we listen back and, all we hear are like, oh yeah, I didn't know that, did I? And then, all those things, we can listen back and judge, 20 years ago how we were. But, no, I listen to those albums and I'm really, really proud of them and good playing from everybody.
It's your legacy. This is your legacy.
Yeah.
What about the Mars Quartet?
The Mars Quartet, yeah. So at some point, the guys in the Jazz Update were getting kind of busy. I was kind of losing steam on trying to book and hustle and the PR, and that's just a lot of work, and it sucks.
Yeah.
So the Jazz Update, didn't disband, and actually we're going to do a reunion gig in February at Mr. Henry's, but I was starting to play with some other musicians, and it was sort of more sort of electric based, and guitar based. And so the Mars Quartet, we found a regular gig in Annapolis and started writing and doing some music. So that band did an album, one or two, and so that was kind of fun.
Blind Watchmaker.
The Blind Watchmaker, that was the name of the album we did.
Now, how'd you come up with that title?
That title, man, that title is, I need to do some research. It is from, it's like a scientific argument. I'm going to get this totally wrong for anyone that really knows about this, kind of about evolution. And so the idea that, how we evolved from, the fish in the water who crawled onto land, and, how evolution kind of works, that this amazing thing that we are has evolved. And you would think that somebody had to design us, right? And so the idea is evolution. We evolved this way, that there wasn't anybody that created us this way. So of course we can get into a religious argument like, we were created this way in the image of God or whatever. So I was sort of thinking about that kind of stuff, and kind of reading some books about that, about how things can evolve into these really complicated things, whether it's a flower or a person or a tree, but we can actually kind of trace back scientifically how it got there.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of where the term comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know you've been talking about you as an educator. I want to go deeper.
Sure.
On this final portion of our conversation. I read that you have developed and served as artistic director on over 90 different workshops on specific jazz topics, and conducted over 3,000 jazz masterclasses in the last 18 years.
Yeah.
How you do that?
Man, well, it's like these videos that I do every Friday. It's like, well, I'll just do another one next Friday. And, it's like,
they start to add up.
And it's like the hair. It's like, man, I don't have time to think about a new haircut. Just give me the same haircut. And it's like, okay, I guess I've had the haircut for 30 years. So it's like that, like, well, here's another Friday. Yeah. I mean, I'll just do another one. I did it last week. I'll do another one. And then next thing you know, 430 Fridays have gone by.
Yeah.
So these workshops, so when all this stuff is sort of geared towards adults. And so I think where the whole adult thing came from, when I moved to this area in 96, through no doing of my own, I found myself with some, adult students, some government agency worker guy wants to play saxophone, somebody else runs a pharmaceutical company, whatever it is. And these guys are coming to me for lessons and they just want to learn how to play blue bossa or something. Yeah. And over time, they started asking me like, well, is there a class I could take at a community college? Like, I want to play in a combo. I'm telling them, you should go to a jam session. They're like, well, where? Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. Or it's like there's one on U Street on Wednesday night that starts at 11 p.m. Mm-hmm. These guys have to be up at 5 in the morning. They're not going to U Street on Wednesday, right? So after lots of these people asking me and me essentially blowing them off. A friend of mine who's a psychologist, and he does group therapy sessions. He gets a bunch of people, we sit around and talk, right? Yeah. He's like, dude, do that for jazz. Like, why not assemble a group of your students. And I had arguments for him. It's like, man, I got saxophone. I don't have a bass student. Yeah, I need a bass player. He's like, well, find a bass player. Call a friend. Like, there's got to be a bass. So it's like I blew him off. So after a while, it's like, okay, let me do this. And so I assembled, I got 3 of my sax students, and I knew a piano guy, and a bass student showed up, put it together. And
this is the Jazz Wire.
Well, at this point, this is before Jazz Wire. This is like an in-person thing. Now it's known as Jazz Band Masterclass.
Okay.
So I assembled, and we met at a place in Annapolis called 49 West, good live music place. And I had these guys play together. And it was a blast. Like, they had a blast because they were playing small group jazz. They could maybe go to a community college and play in a big band, but now they're playing small group. I'm talking to them about, look, the time's messed up, or it's not swinging, or the bass has to connect to the, the kind of basic stuff.
Yeah.
And they're getting better. And I did a little math in my head. When I do a private lesson, I get paid once an hour. When these 7 guys were doing this class, I got paid 7 times an hour. And here's the math. That's 7 times better.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Right? So it's like, wait a minute. And I think I was charging these folks maybe, $60, session. And in a couple hours, I made like $400 or $500. And I'm like, I think I want to do that again. Right?
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, financially, like, like that little entrepreneur thing, like, wait a minute.
It starts to click.
That's better than, playing a gig I don't want to be on for $120.
Yes.
And it was so much fun to have to talk about the band. And it was so challenging that, I know about saxophone and I can show you fingering for whatever, but what do I tell the piano and guitar who are trying to comp together?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I'm having to think about that. They had a great experience. I had a great experience. They got value for their money. I enjoyed their money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And so that grew. And so now there are 16 groups like that.
Wow.
So I have 16 of these groups that meet twice a month, month in, month out, year in, year out. And I have other faculty members that help teach this stuff and guest artists and everything. Okay. So that's kind of where it started. And again, this is community-based, right? Gotcha. It's not that one-on-one thing.
Now, so the Jazz Wire, and I want to talk about the jazz.
Yeah.
What, if you had to describe the Jazz Wire, you've been talking about it, but if you were talking to her, what is the Jazz Wire? Yeah,
so Jazz Wire, it's an online platform. It's a subscription website. Okay. So think about anything you have a subscription to. There's a paywall, and to get to the good stuff, you pay. Yeah. So it's $50 a month, a little less than that, I guess. Yeah. $50 a month, and it's online. So we have students from 25 different countries who want to learn how to play jazz. It's all instruments. Mm-hmm. So we have, everything you can imagine. We've, bass, drums, piano, trombone, flute. We've had harp, we've had vocalists, we've had banjo.
Instructors for each particular.
So we actually don't. So the way we have it done is that it's sort of more about conceptual, it's all song based. So every Saturday, 3 different lessons come out on 3 different tunes. So we're working on a Bill Evans minor blues called Interplay in the advanced group. We're working on I'll Remember April in the advanced group, the intermediate group, I'll Remember April, and then the green group, the novices, they are working on You and the Night and the Music. Great old standard. Mm-hmm. And so they're video lessons. Each one's about 15 minutes each that I do, where I'm talking about at a novice level, this song, You and the Night and the Music. And so the melody uses a lot of upper and lower neighbor tones. And it's got a lot of minor 2/5s. So we're going to talk about some of the melodic concepts, some of the harmonic concepts. The form is AABA. And so it's for all instruments, including drums. That information is going to help them get going. Gotcha. The most important thing about Jazz Wire, so there's those lessons that people can take at any time. They're done on video. The most important thing is the community thing we were talking about. It's great if 50 people do the lesson in their own basements, 50 different places on earth. But the important thing we've agreed is we need to get together and hang and hear each other play and give each other advice. And so there's so what people do is post audio or video recordings of them. Like, you know, so today I got up early and there were about 70 posts. 70 people around the world had looked at the lesson. And this afternoon there will be 70 more for me to look at. And it's like, hey, here's me playing what Jeff said. And I'm like, okay, you know, and now, so I've heard them play and now I give them personal feedback.
Gotcha. Now, are you taking all on-comers? Do they come with some level of musical proficiency?
Exactly. And so that's a great point that when I do a video that I put on YouTube where I'm teaching a concept, Coltrane minor pentatonic, whatever, that's me blurting out information to the camera. I don't really call that teaching because I don't know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Like 2,000 people are going to see that video or 20,000, but I don't know if they understood me or not. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they've been playing jazz for a week or for 75 years. I don't know what they misunderstood, right? So it's one-way communication, which is not actually communication. Mm-hmm. Communication needs this feedback loop. Yeah. So good question about Jazzwire. So every single person that comes in, hundreds and hundreds of people in Jazzwire, you have to send me a recording before I let you in. So you send me 2 tracks of recording, and then I send you a personalized growth plan from that. Mm-hmm. Like, hey man, your tone is great. Mm-hmm. You're behind the beat a fair amount. I can hear you know the key areas of the tune, but I'm not hearing chord tones. I hear you're playing the C major scale, but I'm not hearing D minor and G7. So we're going to work on that. You know, and it's these 15 things. So the cool thing is before you and I get started, I know you're playing. So now when you put up a post on this lesson, we have a history. And we're friends already. Like we can talk. We've hung out. Wow. And so now when I give you feedback, or Steve Herberman on guitar, or one of our other faculty members, we know these folks we're talking to. So most days there'll be 40, 50, 60, 70 posts of people sharing their stuff. And now, yes, the faculty comments, but it's like when I was at North Texas, you were at Howard. Yeah, your teacher said something, but through the week, it was your friends that gave you the feedback. So the cool thing is it's that sort of Socratic method of I'll say something to that person's post, but they'll get 10 other bits of input from their peers. Wow. And now I'll keep an eye on that. If they start going down the wrong path or if they get some really squirrely advice, I'll go, well, actually, no, maybe think about this. So that's what Jazzwire is. And it's cool because it's asynchronous. It doesn't happen in time where you have to log on at 2 p.m. Eastern. Yeah. You can do the video at any time. You can practice it in your own time. You post your work. You can post 5 times a day or once a month, whatever's good for you. And you get this feedback and this support from the community. Yeah. So the idea for that is I was starting to get calls from people around the country, you know, somebody in Cincinnati, somebody in Copenhagen, someone in Brisbane, Australia, like who's working with adults here in Cincinnati or in Brisbane. And I had no answer for them. So after a year or two of thinking about it, that's where Jazzwire came from. It was that answer to how can I help somebody in Spain who isn't finding that help. Yeah.
I think one thing about being you call yourself an intellectual, analytical person is that you're a great communicator. You're able to articulate your ideas and make them so that people, and break them down so different layers of people can understand.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. And you know, doing the videos, those, you know, I keep saying
now, are those off the cuff? Are you?
They pretty much are. I mean, like the guided listening ones, you know, I'll be walking the dog and for 2 days, for 2 or 3 days, I'll listen to that track and I'll realize like, you know, honestly, why is that swinging so damn hard? What is going on? And you know, I try to come up with, you know, I try to hear something. Yeah. And if I can't, it's like, look, y'all, this is swinging. Play along with that.
Trust me on that.
Play along with that, right? So, yeah, so it's fun. You know, and again, it's like you know, I mean, you're really good at interviewing, and I bet you're better than you were on day one.
Yes.
Right?
I think so.
Absolutely. so that's how we grow, is just keep showing up and keep doing it. So I mean, I appreciate you saying if I'm able to sort of connect dots, and that's one of the things I really always challenge myself to do, is with a concept, how simple can I make it, not in a dumbed down way, but in a distilled way. The way perfume is distilled, one drop is perfect. It's not dumbed down. It's not watered down. It's distilled. So so that's always my goal, is, how short can I make the description and how powerful. So, and I'm not always successful, but that's the goal.
Wow. So we have some closing questions.
Sure.
So you only have one son.
Yep.
Okay. And he's a musician.
He's a musician. Yep.
He's serious about pursuing music?
Yeah, I mean,
so he has all the advantages you didn't have.
It's true. And my wife's a public school music teacher. So,
oh, wow.
So she doesn't, kind of sing or play around the house, but that's her thing.
So
she's wired that way.
Your wife is a musician as well?
Yeah, she does K-5 general music in Anne Arundel County.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So, so Aiden came up with art and music being valued. He's heard me play for probably 10,000 hours in the womb. And when he's trying to play video games, I'm down there, playing Joe Henderson licks or whatever. So it's interesting with him. He doesn't know what he's doing a lot of the time. Sorry, Aiden. Or as a younger guy, it's like, but he plays stuff. It's so confusing to me, because it's like, dude, did you just know that you played a bunch of enclosures into a tritone substitute and then and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just right. Me doing the intellectual thing and he being much more intuitive. So it's interesting that he is a really good mimic, the way some people are good at impersonations, and they can just kind of see something. Guys on Saturday Night Live, right? They can just see something and just make a funny version of that.
Yeah.
And so he, maybe from hearing the music around the house, he heard a good saxophone sound. No one had to tell him how to do that. I had to work so hard. Every day I have to work to get a good saxophone sound. He puts on a chipped reed that's dry and looks like a potato chip. And he sounds like Hank Mobley.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, that bugs me. So and he just plays lines. He doesn't know what he's doing. I have to know them from the ground up, and he can just kind of play.
I think it's genetic, man. I think stuff gets passed down.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So
I do.
So of course his job now is he has to tighten up things. And you have to know what the thing is before you can tighten it up, right? Yeah. But it's like, I'm so jealous of some of what he has,
my oldest son he has that thing. He does production, and he does some stuff like sound like a classical, and I'm like, on piano. I never studied music, just did it, man.
Yep.
And so I said, wow. See, I'm still struggling with this stuff.
Yep. That's great.
All right. So what's next for Jeff Antoniuk?
What's next? Well, really next, in January, so we're in December right here, Jazzwire we were talking about, I want to blow that up as big as we can, because I can see that this really helps people.
Yeah.
And I know there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of adults around the world. We actually did a data study, 7.8 million adults around the world who are way into jazz and want to play on their instrument. So millions and millions. And these folks just don't have anyone talking to them.
Beautiful.
So I'm anxious to get people talking to them. So we're actually raising money, like venture capital, So we're trying to raise money to really blow up Jazzwire.
Yeah.
And sort of get it in front of people more. So that's sort of a big thing. In January, I'm going to the Jazz Education Network conference. You know about Jen?
Jen, yes.
Yeah. So it was just in the last 5 years, right before COVID, I went to the conference in New Orleans, and I loved it. It was so much fun. It's really what you and I do, playing music, thinking about music, talking about music, communicating with musicians. So
Yes.
so I'm getting more involved with sort of the Gen organization, and Jazzwire is now a corporate sponsor. So I'll be
Beautiful.
yeah, so I'll be at the conference in New Orleans. The week right after that is the Navy Saxophone Symposium. Have you ever been to?
No, I've never been.
It's at George Mason University for like the last 40 years.
Yeah.
It's sponsored by the Navy, and it's just a geek fest for saxophone. So it's more on the classical side,
Gotcha.
but they have more and more jazz stuff, and so they've got the big every saxophone maker and mouthpiece maker.
Oh, really?
Has
It's like the going to NAM.
yeah, just like that, smaller for saxophone, and all day
Man, I need
long
to go
there's.
there. When is that?
Yeah, so I wrote it down here because I can't remember. January 12th and 13th, Friday,
Oh
Saturday.
man, and that's in where's it?
It's at George Mason University.
Oh, I gotta go check that
It's
out.
good, man. It's free. And there's concerts all day long. So it's like I'm doing a concert, Elijah Balbed.
Yeah, but Elijah,
so
yeah.
so Elijah and I and a couple other guys are doing a saxophone quartet, doing like world saxophone,
wow. Yeah.
like crazy David
Yeah,
Murray,
yeah.
Hamiet Blewett stuff. And I'm doing a workshop, an improv workshop. So yeah.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a blast. And then after that,
I'm trying to make it out there.
yeah. In the last week of January, during COVID, we all had to do stuff online. And I found how to do workshops in real time on Zoom. We all did it to some degree,
Yeah,
teaching on Zoom. So I've kept that going. So the last week of January, I do a 3-day workshop called the Jazzwire Winter Summit.
Beautiful.
So if anyone's interested, it's
Yeah.
jazzwiresummit.net. Go to the website. And so we do playing and teaching and theory and analysis online for 3 days.
Man, you stay pretty busy.
I try to stay busy.
And your wife, she works with you with this?
She does not.
Okay.
And that's probably good. Yeah. No, she's busy doing her own thing.
Got you.
But I've got a full-time employee who helps me, kind of keep this going. I've got a lot of kind of support around it. But
Evolution is wonderful, man. Because you done I bet you doing the jazz in the schools, and now it's the evolution, man.
yeah,
It's
and
beautiful.
and it really, I think evolution is a good way to talk about it, because I can't say a lot of this stuff has been planned. Oh, I'm going to have an online thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. It was just a problem to solve. Like people are emailing me from around the country, asking me this question. I have no answer.
Yeah.
And the first 10 times it happened, I just ignored them. Sorry, don't know. But after like the 20th one, it's like, well, I guess that's
There's
a
an opportunity.
need. Yeah, that's a need,
Yeah,
right?
and-
So now I start thinking about it. So there wasn't this big plan to have 16 groups or to have an online platform or to raise money. It was just like following your nose, pour some water on the lawn and the water takes the path of least
And you
resistance.
love what you do?
And that's it, right? So that's the other thing
Yeah.
is I love the playing. I love the challenge of communicating about the music. And then I love this group of people, these adult amateurs, semi-pros that I work with. So, yeah.
Final question.
Yes, sir.
How can people learn more about you and what you're doing? You can look in the camera and let them know how they can contact you if they want to learn more about what you're doing.
Oh, that's beautiful. So to get in contact with me personally, really just go to jazzwire.net. And you'll get to the landing page. It'll talk about Jazzwire. You can get a 1-month free trial because, we've talked about Jazzwire here a little bit, but it's so different from everything else out there. That's the good news, is we're very different from all the other sites. The bad news is, how do you explain it in, 3 easy sentences? So take the free trial. And you can see exactly what's going on behind the paywall, all that kind of stuff. And you can contact me through Jazzwire. So like you can literally, let's talk on the phone, let's email. That's a big part of what I do. I want 100 people, 1,000 people to email me. That's the goal, right? So that's probably the best way to do it. So if you live in the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area, we can work in person in these small groups. You can join a small group, and we have a couple openings. That's Jazz Band Masterclass. If doing it online, or for some people, traveling to this area doesn't work. For other folks, it's anxiety producing. And you will want to. For now, I'm just going to do it at home. That would be Jazzwire. And if you're interested in the Jazzwire Winter Summit, yeah, definitely check out jazzwiresummit.net. We have, I think, 8 openings left, and that's happening January 26th through 28th. Online, you can attend in your sweats or your pajamas. So that's pretty good.
Jeff, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time, the information. Wonderful, man. It's been like an educational experience.
Oh,
for
I
me.
appreciate it.
So and continue, man, doing all that the great work that you're doing with students and the music. Any recordings in the near future?
Well, there's a couple things I'm talking about,
Okay.
and so we need to, again, I just need to book a date, hire the people, whatever. There's a great drummer in New York, Sherry Miracle, and she and I have been threatening to do a sort of duo-based recording, kind of drums and saxophone, and then we'll add bass, we'll add organ, whatever.
Wow.
We've been threatening to do that for 3 years, so
Okay.
I'm going to see her next month. We're going to nail it down.
Well, I'm going to definitely continue to follow you.
That's
what you're
great.
doing, and I'm going to check out them videos because I know I can learn a few things.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I was thrilled to get your call to do this. This was really exciting. You're someone who's been on my radar forever. And like I said, we haven't done enough together. So glad to be here.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Well, there it is. The wonderful saxophonist and educator, Mr. Jeff Antoniuk, right here on A Conversation in Jazz. And we'll see you on the next one.